The first Imperial ships appeared in Earth's skies on a clear September morning, massive vessels that blotted out the sun over major cities worldwide. Humanity had long prepared for this moment, first contact, but not with the expectations of arrogance they encountered. Admiral Kim stood on the command deck of the UNSC Defender, watching as the sleek silver craft of the Galactic Empire dwarfed his flagship. The Empire's vessels possessed an almost organic quality, their hulls rippling with colors that shouldn't exist in nature. Through the viewscreen, Kim could see the Imperial delegation preparing to board. "They're hailing us again," Lieutenant Tay reported, her fingers dancing across the holographic controls, still insisting on full atmospheric entry with their entire fleet. Kim shook his head. "Tell them again. 3 ships only. Earth defense protocols are non-negotiable." The Empire had discovered Earth almost by accident, their exploration vessels detecting the faint radio signals that had been leaking into space for over 2 centuries. Their first transmissions made their position clear. They represented a coalition of over 300 advanced species spanning thousands of star systems. Humanity was merely the latest primitive civilization to be graced with their attention. At the diplomatic reception in New Geneva, the Imperial ambassador, a tall being with iridescent skin who called himself Diplomat Oral, spoke with calculated precision. "The Empire extends its protection to all developing worlds. Your species shows potential. We offer protected status, which means no other spacefaring race may interfere with your development." The unspoken implication hung heavily. Except us. Dr. June, Earth's leading physicist, watched the exchange with growing frustration. The data crystals in her pocket contained the findings that had kept her awake for months, the quantum resonance scans showing something massive stirring near the galactic core, energy patterns unlike anything in human scientific records. "Before we discuss protection," June interrupted, stepping forward despite protocol, "we need to share critical information about anomalous energy readings from the galactic core." She pulled out the crystal, its surface glowing with stored data. "Our quantum resonance technology has detected something approaching, something that appears to be waking up." The Imperial science officer, a being with multiple eyes that blinked in unsettling sequence, made a sound that human translators rendered as laughter. "Quantum resonance? Your species has barely mastered proper fusion. These readings are undoubtedly misinterpretations of normal cosmic background radiation." "We've been monitoring these patterns for 3 years, June persisted, activating a holographic display showing the strange energy patterns pulsing outward from the core. "They're growing stronger and spreading in this direction." The Imperial delegation exchanged glances that even across species barriers clearly communicated dismissal. Diplomat Oral waved a 3-fingered hand. "Young species often misunderstand the complex phenomena of space. The Empire has mapped every significant energy pattern in the galaxy. There is nothing approaching." Admiral Kim stepped forward. At 63, he had spent his life preparing humanity for this moment. Contact with advanced civilizations. But not like this. Not with beings who refused to listen. "Our technology developed along different paths than yours," Kim explained. "While your civilizations focused on faster-than-light travel and energy manipulation, we developed deeper understanding of quantum states and dimensional resonance. These readings don't appear on your scanners because they exist partially outside normal space-time." The Imperial Defense Coordinator, a mechanical being with a voice like grinding metal, responded, "We have monitored the galaxy for 10,000 years. Your primitive equipment cannot detect what our advanced systems miss." The meetings continued for 3 days, the Empire presenting technological gifts that would bind Earth to their authority while consistently refusing to examine the human warnings. They offered obsolete shield technology and outdated star charts, while demanding access to Earth's unique quantum resonance devices, technology they claimed couldn't possibly work, while simultaneously attempting to acquire it. On the final day, standing on the observation deck of the orbital station where negotiations had moved, Dr. June made one last attempt. "The entities we've detected feed on advanced energy signatures. Your core worlds will be the first targeted. We've documented increasing disappearances of stellar bodies along the pattern line." stellar bodies disappear for countless natural reasons, the science officer replied dismissively. Your instruments are simply inadequate. As the Imperial delegation prepared to depart, Admiral Kim requested a private word with diplomat Aurol. In the quiet of the station's garden chamber, designed to demonstrate Earth's biological diversity, Kim handed over a small data cube. These are the specifications for a simple detector based on our quantum resonance technology. It won't give you our full capabilities, but it will let you verify what we're seeing. I suggest you build it when you return to your core worlds. The diplomat took the cube with obvious skepticism. The Empire appreciates your concern, but we have managed galactic affairs since before your species discovered fire. Kim's weathered face remained impassive. There are things stirring in the dark between stars that your scanners cannot see, but ours can. Ignore us at your peril. As the Imperial ships rose from Earth's atmosphere, their engines leaving trails of exotic particles that shimmered like oil on water, humanity's leaders gathered in the underground command center beneath New Geneva. They didn't listen, June said, staring at the tactical display showing the departing fleet. No, Kim replied, activating the Global Defense Grid development plans with a sweep of his hand, which means we have approximately 5 years to prepare before what's coming arrives. The Empire has made their choice. We'll make ours. Above them, the stars seemed to pulse slightly, a subtle distortion only visible to those who knew exactly where and how to look. The orbital defense platforms around Earth gleamed in the sunlight, massive structures that had transformed the planet's appearance from space. Where once Earth had been a blue marble with wispy clouds, it now bristled with technology, a statement to the stars that humanity would not go quietly. 5 years had passed since the Imperial delegation had dismissed Earth's warnings with condescending smiles and patronizing reassurances. 5 years of frantic preparation. The global economy had shifted entirely to defense, with new technologies emerging weekly from research labs that operated around the clock. In the Lunar Command Center, Admiral Kim, now with more gray in his close-cropped hair, studied the holographic display of the galaxy. Red markers pulsed where the quantum sensors detected disturbances, the creatures stirring from their ancient sleep. The pattern had expanded exactly as Dr. June had predicted. Another Imperial colony just went dark, reported Commander Wu, looking up from her console. That's the 7th this month. Kim nodded grimly. The Empire's dismissal of Earth had been complete. They hadn't even bothered to establish regular communication channels after departing. What little information humanity gathered came from long-range monitoring and the occasional refugee ship that fled toward the galactic rim. Their official broadcasts are still claiming technical difficulties and sunspot activity, Wu continued. But we intercepted a military transmission. They've lost contact with an entire sector near Proxima Centauri. Dr. June entered the command center, her lab coat exchanged for the blue uniform of the United Earth Defense Force. The past 5 years had aged her too, stress lines carving paths around her eyes. The new resonance disruptors are online, she announced. We've confirmed they can destabilize the entity's energy matrix at close range. Production is ramping up, but we'll have enough to defend our system and perhaps a few nearby stars. Kim nodded. And the Imperial worlds? June's expression darkened. Without their cooperation, we can't help them implement the technology in time. Their worlds are already being surrounded. On the other side of the galaxy, the Imperial capital, world of Luminara, shimmered under the light of 3 suns. The Imperial Palace, a structure that spiraled impossibly upward for kilometers, hosted an emergency council meeting. Supreme Commander Zorith, a being evolved from apex predators with ridge-backed armor, naturally grown over sensitive skin, slammed a clawed appendage onto the crystal table. Another colony gone. 3 billion citizens. This is no longer coincidence or technical failure. The Imperial Science Directorate, represented by a collective consciousness housed in a hovering mechanical orb, pulsed with disagreement. Our analysis suggests a new form of spatial anomaly, perhaps triggered by recent stellar activity. There is no evidence of hostile intent or coordinated attacks. Spatial anomalies don't selectively target defense systems before communication arrays, Zorith growled. Something is hunting us. The Emperor, being so ancient and modified that little of the original species remained visible, raised a hand for silence. What of the human warning? Could there be merit to their claims? An uncomfortable silence fell across the council chamber. Eventually, the diplomatic minister spoke. We've analyzed their data repeatedly. Their detection technology operates on principles our science cannot verify. It is most likely an attempt to gain protection or technology from us by manufacturing a crisis. When the Imperial message finally arrived at Earth, a request for further discussion of Earth's earlier concerns, humanity was ready. Ambassador Lee, a veteran diplomat with a reputation for directness, was selected to lead the mission. The UNSC Harbinger, Earth's most advanced diplomatic vessel, departed with a small escort fleet. The journey to the Imperial capital took 3 weeks through conventional space. The Empire possessed faster-than-light travel technology, but had refused to share it during their brief contact. Humanity had developed their own version in the intervening years, not as elegant but effective. Lee spent the journey studying the latest quantum resonance scans. The creatures, for lack of a better term, were moving faster now. Several had already reached the densely populated Imperial worlds of the Inner Rim. The patterns suggested intelligence, or at least predatory instinct. They were hunting energy sources, drawn to the powerful technologies the Empire had spread throughout the galaxy. When the Harbinger arrived at Luminara, the changes were immediately apparent. The once bustling space lanes were nearly empty. Defense platforms orbited in tight formations. The gleaming capital showed signs of strain. Power outages darkened sections of the massive city continents, and military vessels patrolled in formation. The Imperial reception was stiff but anxious. Lee noted how the grand chambers, designed to intimidate visiting dignitaries with their scale and opulence, now seemed hollow and vulnerable. The Emperor himself attended, an unprecedented honor that spoke volumes about their desperation. "We have reviewed your earlier warnings," the Emperor stated without preamble. "Recent events suggest there may be merit to your concerns. We request any information you can provide about these disturbances." Lee activated a holographic display showing the latest scan data. The room darkened as a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy materialized, red tendrils spreading from the core outward. Like a viral infection, several pulsed directly around Luminara. "These entities exist partially in quantum space," Lee explained. "They feed on advanced energy signatures, particularly the type generated by your faster-than-light drives and power cores. We've been tracking them for 8 years now." "If this threat is real," the diplomatic minister interjected, "why come to warn us? Our relations have been minimal." Lee's expression remained neutral. "Because extinction threats don't respect political boundaries. We hoped you might contribute your considerable resources to a joint defense initiative." For 3 days, Lee presented Earth's research, defense plans, and technological developments. The Imperial scientists remained skeptical, questioning methodologies. They barely understood and dismissing conclusions that contradicted their established knowledge. On the final day, an urgent message interrupted the proceedings. Another Imperial world had gone silent, this one just 2 systems away from the capital. Panic flickered across even the Emperor's controlled features. "We need time to verify this information independently," the Science Directorate announced. "Your resonance technology contradicts established physical laws. We cannot commit Imperial resources based on unproven theories." Lee gathered the data crystals, sliding them methodically back into their case. The Emperor watched with growing unease. "Perhaps a joint research initiative," the Emperor suggested. "We could provide resources while your scientists—" "That time, past 5 years ago," Lee interrupted, an unforgivable breach of Imperial protocol that drew gasps from the assembled ministers. "We offered you knowledge freely then. Now we'll save ourselves." As the Harbinger broke orbit, Lee watched the glittering Imperial capital recede. In the distance, just visible through the quantum sensors built into the ship's observation deck, a shadow moved between stars, something vast and hungry, approaching the unsuspecting Empire. The first full emergence was witnessed above Thalassa, the Empire's premier shipyard system. Security footage, later recovered from automated buoys, showed it as a rippling distortion that seemed to fold space itself. a darkness deeper than vacuum that moved with purpose. Imperial sensors registered nothing until the moment it engulfed an orbital defense platform housing 10,000 personnel. The structure simply winked out of existence, leaving behind a strange radiation signature that defied analysis. Within hours, similar reports flooded in from across the inner rim. The entities, ancient cosmic predators awakening from millennia of hibernation, had begun their feast. They moved with increasing speed, drawn to the concentrated energy signatures of advanced Imperial technology. Warships vanished mid-transmission, space stations went dark, entire planetary defense grids failed simultaneously. On Earth, the quantum resonance arrays tracked it all, recording the patterns of consumption that matched exactly what Dr. June had predicted years earlier. The creatures weren't simply destroying, they were feeding, growing stronger with each advanced world they devoured. "They're accelerating," June reported to the United Earth Defense Council, her voice steady despite the implications. "The first attacks were tentative, almost exploratory. Now they're consuming entire systems within hours." Admiral Kim studied the holographic display showing the wave of destruction spreading throughout Imperial space. "How long until they reach Earth? 3 months, perhaps 4. But by then, they'll have consumed enough energy to be nearly unstoppable." The Council chamber fell silent as the magnitude of the threat sank in. For 8 years they had prepared defenses, developed weapons, retrofitted ships with quantum resonance technology. But would it be enough? The Imperial distress signal arrived unexpectedly, a desperate transmission broadcast on all frequencies. The Emperor himself, his image flickering and distorted, requested immediate assistance. Behind him, the once splendid Imperial Palace was dimly lit by emergency power, evacuation alarms blaring in the background. "To the leaders of Earth," the Emperor began, his customary arrogance replaced by naked fear. "The threat you warned us about has materialized. Our weapons are ineffective. Our fleets are being consumed. I request your aid in this darkest hour." The decision to respond wasn't made lightly. Earth's resources were limited, its defenses still incomplete. But the strategic calculation was clear. Better to fight the entities while they were still growing than to wait for them to reach full strength. Captain Park stood on the bridge of the UNSC Dauntless, Earth's most advanced warship. At 36, she was young for such a command, but no one questioned her capability. Her specialty in quantum physics and combat tactics made her uniquely qualified to lead humanity's first counterattack. "Final weapons check complete," reported Lieutenant Gill, his hands dancing across the tactical station. "Resonance disruptors at full charge, fleet reports ready." Park nodded, studying the display showing their target. Epsilon Eridani, an Imperial colony world currently under attack. The mission was both humanitarian and strategic. Rescue survivors if possible, but more importantly, test Earth's weapons against the entities in actual combat. "All ships prepare for phase jump," Park ordered. "Remember your training. These things exist partially outside normal space-time. Conventional weapons will pass right through them. Target only with quantum-locked resonance disruptors and maintain your dimensional shields at all times." The jump sequence initiated, reality bending around the fleet of 30 Earth vessels. Unlike Imperial ships with their flashy warp signatures, Earth's jump technology operated on quantum principles, subtle, nearly undetectable, and theoretically invisible to the entities. They emerged into chaos. The Epsilon Eridani system was already half consumed, its outer planets dark and lifeless. The colony world itself was surrounded by a swarm of Imperial ships, firing desperately at rippling patches of darkness that seemed to absorb both energy weapons and physical projectiles, without effect. "Imperial flagship is hailing us," Gill reported. "On screen," Park ordered. The Imperial Fleet Commander, a tall being with crystalline features that reflected light in hypnotic patterns, appeared. "Earth vessels, you must retreat immediately. Our heaviest weapons have no effect on these abominations." "We're not here to retreat, Commander," Park replied calmly. "Target the largest concentration of entities with resonance disruptors. Full spread." The Dauntless shuddered as its main weapons discharged. Not beams or projectiles, but precisely modulated quantum disruptions that rippled through multiple dimensions simultaneously. Where they intersected with the shadowy entities, something extraordinary happened. The darkness seemed to convulse, its edges becoming momentarily solid before retracting like a wounded animal. "Direct hit," Gil shouted. "Entity is destabilizing." "All ships, target that same frequency," Park ordered. "Fire at will." The Earth fleet moved in perfect coordination, their smaller size belying their advanced capabilities. Each vessel projected dimensional shields that flickered with strange colors as they deflected the entity's feeding attempts. Their weapons fired in synchronized patterns, creating interference nodes where the entities became vulnerable. An Imperial cruiser, caught between three entities, began to shimmer as its energy was drained. Park ordered immediate intervention. "Dauntless. Positioning for rescue operation," she announced. "Deploy resonance buoys to create a safe corridor." The Earthship dove between the wounded Imperial vessel and the feeding entities, resonance weapons firing continuously. Small drones launched from its hull, each generating a disruptive field that forced the shadowy predators back. Imperial. "Vessel, adjust your shields to match this frequency," Park transmitted, sending the specifications. "It will temporarily mask your energy signature." From the observation deck of his command ship, Imperial Defense Minister Castro watched in astonishment as the human vessels, tiny compared to Imperial warships, effectively fought creatures his most powerful fleets couldn't even touch. Their technology seemed almost primitive in some ways. No massive energy weapons, no reality warping engines, yet devastatingly effective against these interdimensional predators. "How is this possible?" he demanded of his science officer. "Their weapons operate on principles we dismissed," the science officer admitted reluctantly. "The quantum resonance effect creates a disruption specifically calibrated to the entity's dimensional frequency. They're not trying to destroy them with brute force, they're unraveling their quantum structure." After 6 hours of continuous combat, the remaining entities retreated from the Epsilon system, leaving behind a wounded but surviving colony. The Imperial fleet, which had lost 37 ships before Earth's arrival, gathered around the human vessels with a mixture of gratitude and wounded pride. Captain Park stood before a visual array displaying the aftermath. Preliminary assessment. "Our weapons are effective but not perfect. The entities can adapt to specific frequencies. We'll need to continue modifying our approach." As she prepared to address the Imperial commander, Park couldn't help but feel a grim satisfaction. After years of being dismissed as primitive, humanity had just demonstrated mastery of physics the mighty empire couldn't comprehend. The cost of that lesson, measured in billions of Imperial lives already lost, was too high, but perhaps now, finally, they would listen. The Imperial flagship entered Earth's orbit with none of the pomp that had marked their first arrival 8 years earlier. No massive fleet, no show of force, just a single vessel bearing diplomatic markings and broadcasting continuous identification signals. Earth's defense grid tracked its approach, quantum resonance cannons locked on but holding fire. In the orbital diplomatic station, Admiral Kim adjusted the collar of his formal uniform as the airlock cycled. He never imagined this day would come, the Emperor of 1,000 worlds, personally traveling to Earth to beg for help. The Imperial entourage that emerged was a shadow of their former magnificence. Gone were the ornate robes and hovering attendants. The Emperor himself, once augmented to appear godlike, now looked diminished. The biosynthetic enhancements that had given his skin a golden glow now appeared dull, his movements stiff with the strain of recent defeats. "Admiral Kim," the Emperor said with a small bow that would have been unthinkable in previous times, "we meet again under grave circumstances." Kim returned the gesture precisely. "Indeed. We've been monitoring the situation. You've lost 37 major worlds in the past month alone." The Emperor flinched at the direct assessment. "The entities have exceeded our capacity to resist. Your Captain Park demonstrated technology that affects these creatures. We are prepared to negotiate for access to this technology." Behind Kim stood Earth's Unified Defense Council, 12 leaders representing humanity's combined military and scientific might. Among them, Dr. June watched the Emperor with undisguised curiosity. The beings who had dismissed her warnings now stood before her, humbled by exactly the threat she had predicted. "Our terms are non-negotiable," President Yoon stated, stepping forward. "Complete independence and sovereignty for Earth and all human colonies, preparations for your dismissal of our warnings, which could have saved billions of your citizens if heeded, and operational command of all joint defense initiatives against this threat." The Emperor's attendants bristled, but he silenced them with a gesture. "You ask much from an empire that has ruled the stars for 10 millennia. We ask for what is necessary to save what remains of that empire," Kim replied. "Your military tactics are useless against these entities. Your ships are being consumed faster than they can retreat. Without our help, the empire has perhaps 2 months before complete collapse." After 3 days of tense negotiations, the agreement was signed. The Emperor's hand trembled slightly as he pressed his biomarker into the document, officially recognizing Earth as an equal power and accepting human leadership against the cosmic threat. Within hours, the first human technical teams departed for key Imperial worlds. Dr. June personally led the team to the Imperial shipyards at Helios Prime, where they would begin retrofitting the massive Imperial warships with quantum resonance technology. The Empire's ships had raw power that human vessels couldn't match. If properly modified, they could become formidable weapons against the entities. Admiral Han oversaw the military reorganization from the bridge of the UNSC Intrepid. At 53, he had spent his entire career preparing for space combat that had never materialized, until now. The massive holographic display before him showed the combined human Imperial fleet, over 4,000 vessels stretching across 3 star systems. "Their tactics are all wrong," Han muttered, studying the Imperial battle formations. "They're still positioning as if fighting conventional enemies. These entities don't care about crossfire or flanking maneuvers." His executive officer, Commander Bay, nodded. "They've been the dominant force for so long, they never developed adaptive strategies. Their solution to every problem has been overwhelming force. A solution that's feeding these creatures rather than hurting them," Han replied. "Begin transmitting the new combat protocols. All Imperial captains are to report to human tactical officers for immediate retraining. The Imperial fleet." "Admiral," a towering being with 4 arms that moved with unsettling coordination, stood nearby. His expression was unreadable to human eyes, but his rigid posture conveyed clear discomfort at having his authority superseded. "Your ships will be destroyed if they maintain current tactics," Han told him bluntly. "Every energy weapon discharge is like ringing a dinner bell." The fleet admiral flexed his multiple hands. 10,000 years of military doctrine cannot be discarded overnight." "Then your empire won't survive another month," Han replied. The entities, as if sensing the changing tactics, began concentrating their attacks. Where before they had spread throughout Imperial space, now they converged toward critical systems, especially Luminara, the Imperial capital. The patterns suggested either intelligence or instinctive recognition of the new threat humanity posed. Dr. June's research team made a critical discovery while analyzing data from recent encounters. "There's a pattern to their movements," she reported to the Joint Command. "They're not just random predators, they're connected to each other through quantum entanglement, and the connection has a central node." Her display showed the convergence point, a massive distortion near Luminara that seemed to pulse with energy. "If we can disrupt this node, we might be able to sever their connection to our dimension." The battle for Luminara began 3 days later. The combined fleet, now partially retrofitted with quantum resonance technology, formed a defensive perimeter around the capital world. 20 billion Imperial citizens looked to the skies as shadows began to ripple between the stars. The entities attacked with new ferocity, as if recognizing the existential threat the human technology posed. Imperial ships equipped with resonance disruptors held the front lines, while human vessels coordinated the defense with precisely timed attack patterns. Admiral Han, commanding from the Intrepid, monitored the quantum node. "The disruptors are having an effect, but it's adapting too quickly. We need to deliver a concentrated burst directly to the node's center." The calculations were grim. Such an attack would require a ship to penetrate the swarm of entities, reach the node itself, and detonate its quantum core, a suicide mission. Han studied the tactical display, then quietly transferred command to his executive officer. "Prepare. A shuttle to the Resolute," he ordered. The Resolute, Earth's newest battleship, carried the most powerful quantum resonance generator ever built. "Admiral, that's a one-way mission," Commander Bay protested. Han smiled slightly. Sometimes leadership requires more than giving orders. He looked at the Imperial officers on the bridge. "The Empire needs to understand that humanity doesn't just have better technology. We have the will to use it, even at great cost." The Resolute broke formation 30 minutes later, accelerating directly toward the quantum node. Imperial ships moved to provide covering fire as entities converged on the lone vessel, quantum core destabilizing, Han reported, calmly as the ship shuddered under attack. "Manual detonation in 30 seconds. All ships withdraw to safe distance." The Imperial Fleet Admiral watched the tactical display with newfound respect as the human ship dove into the heart of the node, a maneuver none of his captains would have volunteered for. The detonation, when it came, wasn't just an explosion, but a reality fracture, a blinding flash that seemed to fold space itself. Where the node had been, a quantum shockwave expanded outward, catching dozens of entities and unraveling their structure. Throughout the system, the remaining entities recoiled as if physically struck, their coordinated attacks dissolving into confused individual movements. Without their connection to the node, they became vulnerable to conventional tactics. As the imperial capital celebrated its salvation, the Emperor himself ordered a memorial constructed to Admiral Han, the First, human to be honored in the 10,000-year history of the Imperial Monument of Heroes. The sacrifice had done what no negotiation could, earned genuine respect from a civilization that had dismissed humanity as primitive just years before. The final battle took place in the galactic core itself, where the quantum resonance sensors detected the entity's primary nexus. A combined fleet of over 6,000 vessels, the largest military force ever assembled in the galaxy's history, jumped into position around the massive gravity well. Each ship carried advanced resonance generators, the culmination of human innovation refined through desperate months of combat. Captain Park, now promoted to fleet commander after her groundbreaking tactics at Epsilon Eridani, coordinated the attack from the UNSC Judgment. The massive warship represented the perfect fusion of human and imperial technology. The Empire's unmatched power generation systems, paired with Earth's dimensional manipulation capabilities. "All ships in position," reported Admiral Kwan, her tactical officer. "Resonance generators synchronized and ready." On the view screen, the entities swarmed around their nexus, a distortion in space-time that pulsed like a heartbeat. Unlike the scattered predators they had first encountered, these were the Sorcer, ancient beings that had hibernated between galactic cycles for billions of years, awakening when sufficient energy signatures indicated abundant feeding. "Begin the sequence," Park ordered. "All ships, initiate resonance cascade." Across the fleet, quantum generators engaged simultaneously, their output carefully calibrated to create a galaxy-spanning disruption field. The technology that had begun with Dr. June's early detection systems had evolved into a weapon capable of unraveling interdimensional structures. The entities responded immediately, converging on the fleet with desperate hunger. Several Imperial vessels vanished instantly, consumed before their shields could engage. Others fired resonance disruptors, creating safe corridors through the swarm. "They know what we're doing," Park noted grimly. "They recognize the existential threat." Unlike previous engagements, this attack had one purpose, not to destroy individual entities, but to collapse the dimensional gateway that allowed them access to our reality. If successful, it would force the creatures back into their hibernation state centuries ahead of their natural cycle. The battle raged for hours, ships maneuvering in precise formations to maintain the resonance field despite heavy losses. The entities fought with increasing desperation, their attacks growing more coordinated as they sensed their connection to our dimension weakening. "The Nexus is destabilizing," Dr. June reported from the science station, her voice tight with concentration. "Field strength at 87%. We need 90 to trigger dimensional collapse. Park studied the tactical display. Divert. Power from life support to the generators. Minimum survival levels only. The temperature on the bridge dropped noticeably as oxygen levels thinned. No one complained. Every crew member understood the stakes. Field strength at 89%, June continued. Almost there. A massive entity, larger than any previously encountered, emerged from the nexus, its presence so distorting that nearby ships reported reality fluctuations. It moved directly toward the Judgment, seemingly aware of the coordinating role the vessel played. "Incoming!" Quan shouted. "Dimensional disruption wave!" Park gripped her command chair as reality itself seemed to warp around them. Systems failed. Across the ship, the quantum generators straining against unprecedented resistance. "Reroute all power, weapons, engines, everything, into the resonance field," Park ordered. "This is our only chance." Across the fleet, other commanders made the same choice, sacrificing defensive capabilities to strengthen the collapsing field. The entity reached for the Judgment, its form rippling with hungry anticipation. "Field strength at 90%, June announced. "Collapse initiated!" The Nexus shuddered, its pulsing rhythm becoming erratic. The entities surrounding it began to distort, their shadowy forms stretching and compressing as the dimensional barriers reasserted themselves. The massive entity attacking the Judgment paused, then retreated toward the failing Nexus, as if being pulled back. "It's working," Quan whispered. A blinding flash erupted from the Nexus point. Not an explosion of energy, but a collapse of dimensional space. Where the swirling distortion had been, empty space remained. The entities, caught in the dimensional shift, flickered and faded like shadows at noon. Throughout the galaxy, the same pattern repeated. On thousands of worlds, the shadowy predators that had been consuming imperial cities and fleets simply vanished, drawn back into their hibernation dimension by the collapsing Nexus. The silence that followed was profound. After months of constant battle alerts and emergency jumps, the sudden absence of threat left a vacuum almost as disorienting as the entities themselves. 5 months later, representatives from over 400 worlds gathered in the newly constructed Galactic Assembly. On Earth, a gesture of profound significance. For the first time in 10 millennia, the seat of galactic governance had shifted from imperial control. The former emperor, now styled as First Counselor under the new Commonwealth Charter, stood before the assembly. The biomodifications that had once made him appear divine had been removed, leaving him recognizably mortal. For 10,000 years, the empire preserved knowledge, maintained order, and believed itself the pinnacle of civilization, he began. "We categorized and classified all forms of life and intelligence, placing ourselves firmly at the top of our own hierarchy." The vast chamber remained silent, delegates from hundreds of species watching attentively. "In our arrogance, we dismissed a young species that approached us with warnings and offers of cooperation. Had we listened, billions of our citizens might still live. Had we recognized wisdom regardless of its source, countless worlds might have been spared." Dr. June, now Chancellor of the new Commonwealth Science Directorate, watched from the Earth delegation section. Beside her sat Admiral Kim, his uniform now bearing the insignia of both Earth and the Commonwealth, a symbol of the new partnership. "Our salvation came from the very people we dismissed," the First Counselor continued. "And in that humbling truth lies our path forward." Later that evening, as Earth's rings of orbital defense platforms gleamed in the sunset, Dr. June stood in the garden of the Assembly building. Imperial scientists, once the most arrogant intellectuals in the galaxy, approached her with respectful bows, asking questions about quantum theory and dimensional physics. "How did your species develop this technology path when everyone else focused on energy manipulation?" asked an Imperial theoretical physicist. June smiled. "Perhaps because we looked at the universe differently. When you believe you already have all the answers, you stop asking questions." Across the galaxy, reconstruction efforts continued. Human engineers worked alongside Imperial builders, incorporating quantum resonance sensors into every new settlement and ship. The technology that had saved civilization was now becoming part of its foundation. On observation platforms throughout the Commonwealth, citizens of all species gathered nightly to watch the skies. The quantum detection grid, now spanning the entire galaxy, showed no signs of the entities, but humanity had learned the value of vigilance. In the Imperial Archives on Luminara, a historian recorded the first counselor's final official statement, as Emperor. "We ruled the stars for 10,000 years, but our greatest failure was not listening to the wisdom of those we thought beneath us." Next to this record, a new addition was made, the Commonwealth Charter, its first article guaranteeing that no species, regardless of technological development or age, would ever again be dismissed without fair hearing. The lesson had been learned, at terrible cost, but it would not be forgotten. As human ships ventured further into the galaxy, they carried both resonance technology and a philosophy that had proven more powerful than imperial might, the understanding that wisdom could come from unexpected sources and that survival depended on cooperation rather than dominance. The end.